All right, Tej, on Sunday night at Dynasty, the Young Bucks made their return. They cost Swerve Strickland his chance to win the World Heavyweight title against Jon Moxley, and they followed up on it quickly on Dynamite, and I think that was important. First they opened with Jon Moxley cutting a promo, which we can get into, and then Jon Moxley against Shibata. Moxley won in about 5 minutes. Then the Young Bucks came out. Moxley had a few words for them off mic and left, and then that's when the Bucks explained why they did what they did on Sunday. I think some of it landed and some of it felt little got to talk it through. And we even then had Kenny Omega come out and add to it. The gist of it is the Bucks wanted to they said they were doing it for Hangman Page. I don't know how Hangman Page feels about that. And so that was one of the key points. Tej, what did you take from, how would you explain to somebody who's watching us and didn't see the show what the Young Bucks' key reasons were for what they did? And then tell me how you think their reasons for what they did landed with a large mainstream audience, including, by the way, the majority who did not watch the pay-per-view on Sunday.
Well, I mean, my biggest, question mark going into tonight was how the Young Bucks' actions and their current arc would be reconciled with the failed Elite Takeover arc that they were doing before they left on their break. Yep. I think that even more than explaining their actions, what this week's promo allowed us to do was kind of cement the place that the Bucks have within the wider Death Riders narrative, essentially figuring out these two groups that seemingly had the same goal of restoring AEW to the best version of itself. Are they on the same page? Are they adversarial? The Bucks accumulated a lot of enemies in 2024. Where do those relationships stand right now? And what will be the Bucks' main program moving forward? And I think that for the most part, they achieved that. I think in an effort to lay it all out, they kind of got a little bit lost in the weeds, talking about they did it for Hangman Page when Hangman's been on this journey that the Bucks never really acknowledged following late 2024, early 2025. Then, they started moving to Kenny Omega and the one segment that they had laying Kenny Omega out in May 2024 that a lot of people might not remember, as well as calling back to their past rivalry with Swerve Strickland, which, again, didn't really cook far enough for a lot of people to immediately remember, oh, this is what the Bucks are talking about. So I think in execution, it just felt a little fast and a little bit flawed. I think structurally it could have been a little bit different, but the core concept of the Bucks essentially returning and, trying to buddy up with the Death Riders, who are essentially doing what they wanted to do, but are far more dangerous, and then immediately getting rebuffed. It's so in line with the snivelly coward characters that the EVP Bucks are, and I think it should lead to some very, very fun interactions moving forward.
Yeah, no, I think your summary, and this is not a dig at what you just said, so don't take it that way. It was all over the place, but it was accurate. Yep. It was accurate, and that is my issue with it. I'm glad they addressed right away. They kind of had to get past it. Why did the Bucks have an interest in Moxley retaining the title? One thing they said is it was our elevator pitch to the Death Riders, that maybe the Death Riders and the Elite can work together. Problem is, if we go back to the very beginning of the show, we got Moxley, who with a mute button on, or if you didn't understand English, you'd say, this is great. This guy is awesome. He's intimidating. I wish I knew what he was saying. Little do they know, they might not wish they know what he's saying. Because I still don't, now we're kind of back. Fan Blast said in the chat, hey, let's double down on Death Rider stuff that absolutely nobody likes. We are back to Moxley talking about, this is my life's work. It won't be bought or sold. And I still just don't know what he's talking about most of the time. Like, concretely speaking, what does he want? I don't like this. And one of my issues with, I'm not a fan of wrestling storylines where it's about, we want to make the company better. Pro wrestling is an individual sport. I don't hear, I'm not saying athletes in sports don't say that sometimes. I want to bring UFC up to a new level. I'm sure that there was a team mentality when they were underdogs and John McCain was trying to ban the sport because he was in with boxing and all that stuff. But it is kind of the storyline of losers, losing companies or underdog companies. And I think it's better when you're ECW, you're an underdog and you're scrapping from underneath. But when you're run by a billionaire on TBS and TNT and business is down, as opposed to you're trying to make your place in the business and carve out a niche, but instead your attendance is down, you're running smaller buildings. This whole thing about we want to make the company better, even if it's heel saying it, I don't like that story. It's just, to me, what people are interested in watching wrestling is cheering wrestlers they like against wrestlers they want to see lose, and having titles that matter and grudges that interest people. When it starts getting into, let's try to have a battle over the company, it's WWE is worse when it came to the red shirt Raw versus blue t-shirt SmackDown people during the Survivor Series era and the take sides era. That's awful too. Stick to wrestlers fighting each other for selfish reasons, and even baby faces for selfish reasons, for fame and success. So this was a mess, and just the conceptual framework of it didn't land for me, and it still doesn't with Moxley. I don't know what he expects fans to think would satisfy him. What, more wrestlers bleeding? Wrestlers not taking 3 weeks off and 2 weeks on who are EVPs or disappearing for months at a time? I just don't think the average viewer has any idea like what he's talking about. It's very vague. It's kind of like the Aleister Black, Bray Wyatt stuff where it's a word salad. It gives you a vibe and it's good. I mean, like, he makes it work to a certain extent. But then you have the Bucks come out and, you know, they're kind of, like you said, talking about a lot of history that it's good to acknowledge your history, especially when you've been gone for a long time. I almost think there'd been a better way to package this recap. You know, I mean, this might be we're telling the story by video package or sit down promo or something would have worked better than them kind of winging it in the ring. And then we got Kenny. And like, I mean, Lady B, who was complimentary of the show in the chat, but said, even as a Kenny Omega fan, I never want to see him on national TV in workout clothes again. He can and has done and looked better. I will never understand why he does it. James in the chat says, Kenny's promo was awful and it didn't feel like he believed what he was saying. It's just, I mean, promos aren't Kenny's thing. And I'm okay with Kenny being Kenny to an extent. Like, you kind of have to embrace that Kenny isn't a super serious person. He's his syntax is a little weird, his word choice a little weird, but you can tell when he believes in something and his heart is in it, he does get people to rally behind him. I just wish he had sort of practiced more the last 6 years to get better at this, or was preparing more. And, you know, but it just seems like he's kind of satisfied. Okay, you want me to talk? I didn't talk for years. Now I'm going to talk. You're going to regret it. I mean, that's almost like he's on a revenge tour for those who said give him more promo time. You know, like, are you sure you want to see this? I don't think he comes across as unlikable, but he's not a great storyteller. And the thing about, I used to go play video games at a friend's house and he had Shih Tzus who pooped on the floor and it got smelly. And then he says, so eventually, you know, with the stains and the smell, I said, and I'm thinking, you're going to tell your friend, clean your freaking house. No, he goes, let's go to my house. I'm like, wait, just tell him to clean. I mean, if we're to believe he has a friend who week after week isn't picking up after his dog, maybe help his friend clean up his apartment instead of saying, let's go play video games somewhere else. I mean, priorities here, people.
Well, I mean, to me, that's both the beauty and the downfall of the Kenny Omega promo. Is part of his shtick is he is objectively, profoundly, horrifically just lame and uncool, and he's a weeb. And it's getting these like incredibly kind of like stilted, strange analogies and promos that kind of undercut this person's badassery, combined with the fact that they are in fact a god in the ring. That was something that made Omega so, you know, so incredible. It made him seem otherworldly, that this guy who was almost profoundly, cringily ordinary could be so superhuman in the ring. However, there's certain situations in which that works to an extent, and then there's certain situations where that just completely undoes the message. This was not the time for that. The reason that those styles of promos worked when they did was it was when Kenny was untouchable and it sold the idea that nobody could tell him what to do or how to be because nobody was better than him and nobody could knock him off his perch. When you have a Kenny that has an axe to grind, an agenda, it just makes him feel a little too unserious and, not plausible. When you need to buy into the emotion and you don't need to direct an emotion at him, it doesn't work. And that's why it really all kind of fell flat here. I'm just like, okay, why am I supposed to be on this guy's side again? What he's talking about his friend's dog that took a bunch of craps.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And so I don't know. I mean, I don't have a solution. I don't think you can have him. I mean, when I say don't have a solution, I mean, there's obviously things you can do to sort of mask and steer him away from certain traits and have him focus on things that will mitigate some of the negatives of what makes him who he is. And it sounds mean to say that, but there are some things we all are that don't work in every setting in our life. It doesn't mean we have to run from them, but there's 3 or 4 drinks in at the wedding reception, and then there's holding a serious business meeting, and you can do both. You can be the goof at the wedding reception or at the company party or Christmas party, and people will forgive you if you're a bad dancer or sing karaoke funny, and you can show up Monday and hold a meeting and people take you seriously because there's contexts. And with Kenny, he can be video game sweatpants Kenny, but there's a time and a place to kind of try to be more serious. And he's just kind of a weird guy. So the chat has a lot to say about this. I want to pause here. I want to introduce the show and let people know they can be part of it. And then I want to read some of these chat comments about Kenny and the Bucks in the opening segment and the storyline. We'll react more to that. Certainly more to talk about on this show too. Tej, a lot to get to. This is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, April 9th, 2025, and I'm Wade Keller, host of the show. I'm the editor, publisher, and founder of the long-running Pro Wrestling Torch weekly newsletter documenting pro wrestling history for decades, contemporaneously with journalistic style reporting on the biggest stories and a lot of the small stories, behind-the-scenes news, first-hand sourcing, and long-form insider interviews of some of pro wrestling's most influential figures in the ring and behind the scenes, dating back to the late 1980s. And if you become a VIP member, you can dive into those archives and learn wrestling history. There's a server full of wrestling history for you to learn about, and it is not dry. We are a news journalism-based reporting setup, but we also have strong opinions, and you can read about those and kind of experience it in virtual real time as we covered it over the years. PWTorch.com/GoVIP is the way to find out how to sign up. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Full VIP membership unlocks our archives. If you're mostly interested in our current podcast and also the flashbacks that we've put up for VIP members, you can subscribe via Patreon, Spotify, or through your Apple account. Search PWTorch VIP in Patreon or Spotify, or search PWTorch on your native Apple Podcast app on your iPhone. And when the charcoal gray logo pops up, subscribe to that for free and then upgrade. You'll get a free trial there too. And you can unlock all of our VIP shows, which includes, by the way, versions of our free shows like this, where it skips right past the commercial breaks. So it's a streamlined listening experience. Time is money. And you just get our content without the ads. And we certainly value and appreciate all of our VIP members who support us in various ways. But we are here to talk AEW Dynamite on the Wade Keller Post Show. We are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday after Raw, Dynamite, and SmackDown. Live streaming on the PWTorch YouTube channel. Search PWTorch to find us and stream our show live. Subscribe to the channel. Set an alert so that you get a buzzed when we are about to go live, although it's just within a few minutes after those shows. We also on this YouTube channel have Frank Pettiani's Pro Wrestling Then and Now shows. If you haven't looked at those, it's a fun long-form conversation looking back at events from the past, going back to the 1990s. I think even the 80s with some Saturday Night's Main Events. And we also have our NXT post show on Tuesday nights with Kelly Wells, Nate Lindbergh, and that crew. And then also after pay-per-views and PLEs, Brandon LeClaire hosting live call-in shows, which included After Wrestle Dynasty on Sunday. Check that out if you haven't yet. Brandon and Sean doing a thorough job covering that event from Sunday night. You can also subscribe to these shows for free if you're not interested in VIP membership, and that's fine. Hopefully, we can eventually twist your arm and get you to support us that way and unlock all the details. But the vast majority of you obviously are a little more casual in following us, which is great and appreciated and important. And you can subscribe to our shows not only on YouTube, but also an expanded lineup of shows, including the weekly flagship, by searching Wade Keller on your podcast app. Android, iOS, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever. You'll find us. Just search Wade Keller. Blue logo and red logo pop up. Subscribe to both. The post shows are the red logo show. The blue logo is our flagship feed, along with pay-per-view previews, interviews, and other special shows. Most of those are podcast audio only exclusive, so be sure to subscribe. Search Wade Keller, and then you can get our other podcast feed with different hosts covering different topics each day of the week. Search PWTorch for that, and subscribe to the PWTorch Daily Cast. The other logo that pops up when you search PWTorch is that PWTorch VIP feed, and you don't have to use the Apple Podcast app to get free samples of VIP shows. So subscribe to that also. There are free samples of our VIP shows on that feed. But again, if you're using the native podcast app on Apple, with Apple, you can upgrade to VIP using your Apple account. No credit card, no nothing, just upgrade. It's seamless and frictionless as going VIP gets. We're here to continue talking Dynamite, and you get to participate in the chat. So if you're watching us live, be sure to hop in the chat and join the conversation. It's a great group. There's a lot of regulars in there, and I think it's a fun place to be. So join in, and we keep an eye on the chat. If you want to really jump out and be part of the show for sure, or almost for sure, I mean, you could say something crazy and I won't read it, but if you do a super chat, we will prioritize reading your chat on the air. I know a lot of shows do that. We enacted that too, so feel free to support us in that way, and also get to the front of the line to be mentioned. You can also email the show, and that's especially handy if you want to go longer than the chat, if you have multiple questions or a rant, or if you don't watch us live and you can't be part of the chat, but you want to be part of the show. So if you watch Raw, Dynamite, or SmackDown, email us your question or comment. We'll read it on the air, and then you can listen later. And finally, VIP members and Patreon supporters can be a live caller on the show. You can turn your camera off and be audio only if you prefer, which is totally fine, just like our Blog Talk Radio days, or you can be on cam. But you have to be a VIP member or Patreon supporter. The link is in my TV reports or on our Patreon page. We have co-hosts on the show, a rotation of great co-hosts. And Tej Narayanan is joining me today. And he is a contributor to our website, PWTorch.com. Be sure you're checking that out, everybody. We have live TV coverage and new articles, by the way, debuting. We got new writers who are adding a variety of cool features to the list: breaking news, TV ratings reports, flashback articles from 5, 10, 15, even 30 years ago. My 30 years ago Raw reports, I was covering Raw 30 years ago, are posted on the site every week. Cool stuff over there, so check that out also. Tej, welcome back to the co-host chair. It's fun talking AEW Dynamite with you. But first, tell people about your contributions on the WWE side of things for PWTorch.com.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the incredible intro, Wade. As Wade said, my name is Tej Narayanan. I am a regular contributor on PWTorch.com, where I write a column called the SmackDown Feud Tracker, where we break down all active feuds over on WWE's Blue brand. It is a very, very exciting time as we barrel down the road to WrestleMania. Go and check out my column. Check out all of our incredible columns over on the website. We're doing some incredible stuff, some incredible analysis, a wee bit of fantasy booking, but nothing too crazy. We have a lot of fun out there, but my love for wrestling extends past promotions. I absolutely love AEW Dynamite, and I am so glad to be here breaking it down with all you lovely people.
Excellent. So I said we had a lot of chats talking about Kenny Omega and the Bucks. Let's get to some of them here. I will start with a super chat first, which I haven't read. Zach Barber, Torch contributor. Thank you, Zach. Says the Bucks see Mox and the Mechanics as best for business. It's not that hard to understand. The Bucks are also weasels who don't want to fight Moxley and his crew. So the argument is it's not that hard to understand. Zach says is kind of pushing back on the notion of, why are we saying that it's hard to grasp? Elaborate. What's the best case, Tej, for this being not hard to understand? The Bucks think Mox is best to me. Best for business is a vague term that doesn't land with me either. What does best for business mean? The Bucks are EVPs. They want the company to be profitable. Do they want to win titles? I would be against. I'm against them ever acknowledging who the EVPs are on television. I think that's a sort of a meta behind the scenes thing. Why are active wrestlers also executives? I think it messes with the stories they can tell. But we're long past that. We can't put that away. So your thoughts on what Zach said?
I mean, I feel like intentionally they're kind of leaning away from the EVP character concept as a storytelling gimmick, and they're just kind of using it as the persona for the sniveling cowards that have power and have money and want to exert their control, but are, at the end of the day, cowards. I do agree with Zach. Wait, shout out to you, Zach. We love you out here, man. I do agree with Zach that the central relationship between the Death Riders and the Bucks has been laid out fairly cleanly. They said, hey, we want to work with you. This could be great. And Mox essentially shut them down, called them goobers, and said, no, like, walk away. That, to me, combined with how self-serious Mox has been, and the last thing we saw of the Bucks being them shredding documents and running for the hills, scared, that, to me, I completely understood. I think where you get lost in the weeds is bringing back all the Bucks' previous enemies into it, which feels like an entirely different era of the show where everyone had different focuses, and expecting everybody to immediately understand how all these relationships are going to intertwine in the future. That's where I think the promo just got a little bit lost in the weeds. I understood enough that I'm willing to let it play out and not write this off as, a bad promo or a disorganized promo. But I do agree with Zach in that they laid out the most crucial thing, which is these two groups that on paper seem to want the same thing. How are they interacting, and what is the relationship between them? And, they've also laid out who the Bucks' primary enemies are moving forward in Kenny, Hangman, and Swerve, and done a little bit of groundwork to relay why are these people focusing on the Bucks and not the Death Riders, and vice versa.
All right. Derek Mitchell on this topic says, we don't need to be reminded the Bucks being EVPs. Not quite the same, but Brian Pillman's loose cannon gimmick, screaming at Kevin Sullivan, sorry, Booker man. Not exactly the same thing, but to me, I like things defined, and I think that Kenny and the Bucks and originally Cody being EVPs, I didn't know, like, from a sort of a canon storyline aspect, what does that give them extra power? If so, is that fair or unfair? It seems unfair, and so that's my issue in general with it. Now they are addressing it, and that's part of canon now. They are EVPs. So the idea that I think Zach is making is it's not hard to understand. The Bucks have an interest in AEW succeeding, and for whatever reason, they want to work with Moxley and his crew because they think it's best for business. But I don't know what makes that best for business. I mean, that's a vague term that now, of course, Triple H and Stephanie and the Authority kind of ruined over the years. So some other comments about this. Kyle Fassel says, I couldn't help but think of Cody during the Kenny Omega promo. Kenny was once presented as a bigger deal than Cody not that long ago. Do you agree with that? I felt they were kind of presented equal, pretty, reasonably equal early on Tej and AEW's run. I know Cody said I'm not going to be in the world title hunt, but I just thought they both were, vying to be top guys along with Jericho and Moxley and Hangman in those early years.
I mean, it's hard to say looking back on it because you really do remember just how much AEW leaned into the idea of a smorgasbord of wrestling, and their presentation was just so drastically different. Kenny represented what a top guy would look like in, the indies, the super indie era, someone who had ascended through PWG and through DDT and New Japan. He was someone who was intensely himself. He was incredibly goofy. He didn't take himself seriously. And then over on the other side of Dynamite, you got Cody making this grand entrance with Pyro and his dog and his wife and his coach and his rah-rah. Look at me. I'm the best, doing these incredible long town halls like he was out of Jim Crockett Promotions. They both felt like top guys in their same way, but I do agree with the super chat that just because Kenny was in the middle of his belt collector run while Cody was pissing around having never-ending feuds with Anthony Ogogo, it's a lot harder to buy Cody and Kenny as the same. Kenny was very much AEW's king at the top of the mountain during those early years, and I think it's fair to say that Kenny was above Cody at that time.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point because the we can be colored by how big of a star Cody has become, but the Codyverse was a problem. We never got to see where that would play out. I mentioned that there was a lot covered. The Bucks have been gone for a long time. Kenny was gone for a long time. Now they're sharing screen time. A lot happened at the pay-per-view. There's a lot going on with Swerve and Hangman. You got Moxley restating his mission that he seemed to soften on or move away from the last few weeks. A lot was going on there. In response to that, SF Niners fan 23 said, yeah, sit down with JR or Renee would have been better, especially with clips of what they were talking about. This just felt like we almost needed a flowchart to kind of like, here's what happened here. But the problem is I don't know that they can really make sense of everything. Derek Mitchell says, the last time we saw the Young Bucks on TV, they were running away like they owned a bookie some money. And tonight I groaned seeing them back on TV. And let's see. More on Kenny's clothes. Darrell Freeman says, see how it brings you down when Kenny comes out there in workout clothes looking bad, then cuts a bad promo, it brings you down more. He came out not looking like a star, and then he sounded like a non-star. Lady B said, Kenny is a lovable nerd, and I love that about him. He is beloved for a reason. He is quirky, and I love it. Standard Deviation says, I found Kenny's promo endearing personally, but I could understand people not liking it.
There's a line. There's a line. You could buy into the idea that this guy who is the absolute antithesis of what a star should be is, still so compelling and is still so talented. Or you could just say this is taking away from the message because he does not have any of the attributes that we commonly associate with a star. I will just also like to say, Chad, this is the third time I've been on for AEW Dynamite and the third time we've started by talking about Kenny Omega's attire.
Yes. And we don't talk about it except when you're on the show. I don't know why that is.
Yeah, why is that? I watched the rest of these episodes, Wade. It's never brought up unless I'm here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he was in the opening segment and a key figure, okay. and the chat started it. I didn't, but it is a popular topic. Ramen Noodle says, I actually like Kenny's presentation of promos, while at the same time thinking it's cringy and awkward. It seems earnest and endearing for a top guy. And I'm not totally not in that zone. I mean, can you make sense? That sounds like a word salad. I'm not totally not in that zone. There's part of me that is okay with Kenny being cringy and awkward because he is earnest and endearing. I agree with that, but I think they've got to refine it in a way where there's other traits where it feels like a lot of what Kenny does feels first draft. And I think when you are not polished and this isn't your strength, some more run throughs, having people work with him. I don't want him to, maybe we want to downplay the cringy and not lean too hard into awkward, but it is going to be part of his brand. But the earnest and endearing should stand out more. Being informal and a nerd is fine, but you want to stop short of, I play video games and my friend has poop on the floor. Like Goodfella 1422 said, I was out after the poop promo analogy. This presentation for Kenny, it works a lot better when he's actively in a back and forth with other people, because then you can establish that rhythm and you can get a nice dichotomy going. Him and Speedball in the build to Dynasty was absolutely phenomenal, because you just get Kenny interjecting with like, "Oh, thank you," in the middle of Speedball's long speech, which worked perfectly. You understood just how endearing. You were sold on Kenny being this lovable little scamp. But when he does these long speeches, it just feels a little too far on the side of immature. Yeah. Kyle Fassel says there's other people that can play the lovable nerd, not someone that can go like him in the ring. And it does come down to, we want to make the most money and have Kenny be the most successful. Are you limiting how many people who have not been on the full journey with him, or the slice of people who are just like, I like lovable nerds who are cringy? I think that's a slice of your audience. You want to expand it. Just Kyle says Kenny shouldn't be the nerd on TV. Scott TPA says Kenny's not a main event guy. I wish people would stop trying to act like he is. He is a main event at a pay-per-view, in terms of what he can do in the ring. But the thing is there are other people now who are, Will Ospreay especially, but others who work different styles. I mean, AEW success is not going to be built around who has a 3/4 star better match than the other person who's wrestling 4-star matches. Like, AEW success is going to be around, I mean, you have to hit a certain threshold of having a main event quality match, and there's different styles. But, Swerve and Hangman are not Kenny and Ospreay, but there might be more money in them than there are in Kenny right now, or maybe Ospreay eventually. That'll work itself out. Or MJF, he has a different ring style that's less flashy, but still amazing. Zach Barber says, this is who Kenny is. He's awkward on the mic and one of the greatest wrestlers in the world in the ring. At what point is that just accepted?
I think the answer to like at what point is that accepted? It's different for everybody. Like Zach, I agree with you in concept, but I fully in that there may be people who say, all right, this is just a little too awkward for me to buy him as a top guy, and there are people who say, well, it's the fact that he is both awkward and one of the greatest wrestlers that's the secret sauce to why he's so likable and why he's so captivating.
Yeah.
It varies week to week, but just the fact that we're towing the line so constantly means you're not maximizing the amount of people that should be wowed by your international champion.
My streak lives. He's been saying, at what point is that just accepted? I mean, I'm not just going to give up on people and say Kenny is as good as he's going to get. Like, this is like, you don't have to be like his defense attorney, Zach, or anyone who's a fan of his. This critique is not in anything but his and AEW's best interest. The idea is, is there a way Kenny can be authentically himself, but curated, edited, certain things amplified, certain things downplayed in order to appeal to a larger audience? And by the way, Zach, every single successful wrestler goes through this process. They don't just accept the unfinished product. They try to get better. If you're following an NFL team and they're 4-9, you don't go, well, they're just an under 500 team who aren't very good. At what point is that just accepted? Like, if your offense is good and your defense is bad, well, we have a good offense and a bad defense. When will people just accept that? If you're some homer who thinks nothing should ever be said bad about your home team, you're not helping them get better. You want a winning team. So being the run-in apologist who says everything is fine, stop saying anything's wrong, everything in its current state is exactly as it should be, and we should all just accept it, is the message of someone who is going to enable AEW to not improve on their weaknesses and not step up and improve in a way where they can have better strengths. And Zach, I love your contributions, but you are, if all AEW had were your fans, their audience would be even smaller than it is right now. They need people holding them accountable and saying, you know what, there's a better way to present that character. There's a better way to tell that story. There's a better way to feature your pay-per-views, whatever. That's part of improving. Just like every fan base for movie franchises, TV shows, they all want to, if they're a fan of it, they want to see it get better. And just going, I don't want to hear anything. I don't want to see anyone say anything negative. You're not helping. You're hurting. Let's go to some other chats here. James says he got attacked getting stretchered out after having diverticulitis by the Bucks. In his return promo against them, he's talking about Dookie. So, I mean, yeah, there's room for improvement there. And let's see. Dougie Doug said, great show. I agree on the Kenny Buck stuff. The smarkish Vince Russo era approach is dead, and they don't need to overcomplicate things. Derek says, Kenny is a reflection of the crowd and won't pass the airport test. He doesn't need to be a hulking 6'8", 260 guy, but when you're on TV, you have to project yourself as a star. Kenny's uncool look is another reason why I don't like how Speedball comes out looking and acting. Too many people in AEW come out that way. The thing is Speedball's not trying to be a main event guy. I mean, it was sort of, his international title match. They pushed him higher than I would have expected. I like Speedball. I find him endearing.
Speedball Bailey. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, the crowd was into him and is into him and they like him, but he's not a centerpiece champion, like top tier guy. It's that's the spot for the kind of nerdy, goofy. Is he self-aware or not? He just is who he is. People like that, but it's mid-card. It's upper mid-card. He's talented and he's, I think fans are liking him, but Kenny should aspire to more than that. So yeah, go ahead, Tej.
I was just going to say, I'll even take it a step further and say Speedball's not as quote unquote bad as Kenny in that regard, because while he is, very clearly nerdy and geeky, for him, I don't know, somehow there feels like there's a little bit more gravitas underneath it all. I could buy him turning up the seriousness a little bit more than I could Kenny in his current form. Yeah. By the way, speaking of Speedball, Dougie Doug says, I bet Speedball Bailey's moving his dojo to a nicer strip mall with this $100,000 purse. Because they won their match, the 8-man tag, so I assume they're splitting the 400 equally. Speedball said he's going to buy shoes, but he can probably afford to move to a nicer strip mall too. Good comment, Dougie Doug. I absolutely, just real quick, I
Yeah.
absolutely love these 8-man tags. Not only does it feel like focal to what AEW was originally born as, which is taking like the best wrestlers on the world from different universes and mushing them all in the same room. It appeals to that. It appeals to that mark in us that we all love, just seeing a bunch of guys do flippy stuff. But I do like that we're cementing the conglomeration as just AEW's kind of Hontai or main unit, where, you know, it's a bunch of baby faces teaming up and just establishing who's on the same page and who isn't, with Mark Briscoe as the leader. Seeing, you know, the character interactions, it made the 8-man tag this week feel like a little bit more than an 8-man tag. On the heel side, Ricochet just very casually calling himself the leader, while Crew and the Beast Mortos are looking at him like, wait, what did he say? We did not decide that. Ricochet just keeps going on, plays into his deluded heel persona. We got the quadruple bald slap, which is a spot that I wish continues until the end of time.
Yeah.
That's comedy in ring done perfectly. And then, of course, you get each of the baby faces saying, what am I going to spend my money on? It's a quick little window into each of their characters. It furthers them, and it keeps their character interactions clear and elevated in a way that shows AEW's growth. If this was 2-3 years ago, that promo just would have been, you know, a funny moment. But here it's a way to give insight into who these wrestlers are. And, you know, I do want to applaud them for that. Just the fact that Mark Briscoe is saying, I'm going to diversify my bonds. It's a fun gag, but it also shows that he's not just the Delaware chicken farmer. You know, he's an intelligent guy, and he just is intensely who he is. I love that about these. Yeah.
I don't think Mark Briscoe knows what diversify my portfolio means, but I think he thinks it was the smart thing to say to surprise his friends. You might think he's not just a chicken farmer. I think he doesn't know what he's talking about. But that's just, I mean, it's open for interpretation. It was playful, and I popped for it. I thought that was great. And, you know, because you're just expecting him to say something that plays into how we see him, and for him to go, oh yeah, I'm going to diversify my portfolio, my retirement. I mean, it was clever. It was fun. It worked for me.
Yeah, I mean, just real quick before you move on, Mark Briscoe for me has cracked that code of appearing intensely ordinary and not fitting into the mold of a typical star, and yet feeling like a star because he's just so intensely lovably himself that you cannot help but root for him. The fact that this guy is from small town Delaware that makes kung fu noises when he hits you, it could be in line for a title shot. You have no choice but to get on board and just root for him. Maybe it's me because I know the real life history of the Briscoe brothers, but I genuinely want nothing but good things for Mark Briscoe in and out of kayfabe, and I genuinely think he could be AEW's next big like babyface in waiting, because he's just so damn good at what he does.
Yeah, I think there was a window for Mark to be more than he is now. And then I think he just kind of, like a lot of times happens in AEW, he just kind of became a utility guy who they could rely on to give you a good match and a crazy promo. I think it'd be tougher now to elevate him than a year ago. I mean, I think he's been defined down a little bit, but he's not moving down. You know, like he's just kind of at a certain level as a utility guy,
settling into the mid card.
Yeah. But I mean, having good matches, and you know who he is. And I don't think people go, oh, it's Mark Briscoe, I don't want to see what he has to say or what his match is. I think people care about what he does. And I think you could rev him up for another story, Jey Uso like, where suddenly, it's like, oh, I'm better than I realized, and I'm focused in a way that I haven't been before. What can I achieve? Scott, TPA in the chat says Ricochet gives more of a top star vibe than Kenny, and that's okay. Tej, how you feeling about Ricochet? He walked to the line, maybe crossed it briefly, and came back in terms of being a little too over-the-top slapstick with his facial reaction when all four baby faces moved out of his way when he did the flip dive. But if I did a flip dive and landed on my feet and there's a camera right there and I almost bash into it, and I'm also stunned because I know there's four people behind me or about to hit me, his reaction worked. Like I said, I'm not against what he did, but don't make clown faces more than once every 3 months. But that was once every couple months. But that was it worked, but just because it worked doesn't mean do more of it. But he was, from the gimmick of a heel starting a match and then running out of the, taken out right away. His body language, his noises he makes. I mean, he is leaning in and effective at playing a modern day heel who's pulling from old school heel tactics. And I'm enjoying it. And I think he's enjoying himself as much as he ever has in his career. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, leaning into being uncool is a very slippery slope in wrestling, because it's not a medium that rewards subtlety, and it's very easy to flanderize yourself and just kind of become like, ha, 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 look at me, I'm so goofy.
Yeah.
But Ricochet, I think, has found the perfect intersection between being incredibly athletically gifted, being an absolute weasel who punches down further than anyone else can go with his insults, and just being an absolute weasel in the ring. I think he's found a character and a balance that has worked for him. And even something as like over the top as the annoying like bird laugh that he does, it somehow feels authentic in a weird way. You know, he's talking about like, I'm marrying Samantha Irvin and then I'm going to take your belt. There's just something about that that works, and you could buy that there is a guy out there in the real world that would laugh like that and think he got you.
And he didn't give up on it. Like at first it was like, this isn't what the Ricochet we know. This is trying too hard. It's cringy, and he stuck with it. And then what he did is he built a character around it that makes that noise make sense. So the key was at first, that's not Ricochet. Then he goes, wait, get to know me. It's the new Ricochet. And that laugh makes sense now, because he built everything around it that helps it make sense. So I think he's a surprise success story in recent months as a heel. Way more relevant than I expected him to be. I mean, the concern was there's a lot of flippy flop high spot guys in AEW, and you've got to stand out. And there's ways to do that. And I didn't know Ricochet had it in him, but he did. Back to Kenny for a second. A couple more chats here, and then we'll certainly shift to other topics too. Jason Roy says, Omega looked like he'd just come from a non-competitive pickup basketball game. Like, not from a pickup basketball game, a non-competitive pickup basketball game.
Jason, where do you come up with these insults? That is, I'm saving that. I'm going to use that to roast one of my friends next time he shows up not fitted.
Yep. And so Dougie Doug pushes back and goes, I thought Kenny looked great. Normally this is when someone comes to your defense, and this is part of the defense, it's not great. But he goes, I thought Kenny looked great. Normally he's pale and in a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans. He was tan, healthy, and his outfit was fine to me. So the fashion evaluation of Kenny continues. They could turn that into a bit if he weren't a main eventer. And that's where Fanblast says, why can't Kenny just have a nice long run where he's presented as the top guy, the best in the world, and serious? After that, do what you want. And Kyle Fassel said, yeah, I wouldn't care about Kenny looking that way or talking that way if I didn't see him presented as a literal larger-than-life video game character in New Japan back in 2017, 2018. And that's the thing. A lot of people know how they felt about Kenny when he was, 6, 7, 8, 9 years ago. A rising star in New Japan, and then the runaway best wrestler in the business at that time. And they want to see AEW try to work a little harder to capture that. Zach Barber in a super chat again. Thank you, Zach. Says, so make Kenny less of who he authentically is? Is that the idea? And Fanblast says there's a distinct between being something you're not and amplifying the stuff that works and downplaying what doesn't. And I think that's a perfect kind of counter to Zach's position. This isn't about Kenny being inauthentic. It's simply about amplifying the things that are authentic about him that work best for him being seen as a top star. It's not wishing for him to be something he can't be. It's having him work harder to be something we think he can be by maybe running the dog poop in the friend's apartment while you're playing a video game story and go, Kenny, maybe if you were a 19 or 24-year-old stoner who dropped out of school and that's your care. I mean, I could see someone who didn't know Darby Allin would go, well, that's a Darby Allin story. There's a skateboard kid who's probably out. But no, Kenny's
that's not who Kenny's been at his core.
Yeah, or it's not a top star gimmick, and it does come across as just kind of being content with being a slacker and just being unapologetically yourself in a way that's counterproductive for the company. So let's see. I want to get to another comment here. Kyle Fassel says, was not very stoked on the show, if I'm honest. I can't help but feel like a lot of the storytelling was messy and half-baked. San Francisco Niners fan says, pretty good show, especially the first half. Lady B said, I love tonight's show, especially the first 30 minutes. It flew by, and when they got to the trios match, I didn't realize what time it was. So, Tej, your thoughts just on the overall show tonight. What do you think? Big picture of because it's coming out of a pay-per-view. So it's sort of follow up, reset, set the table. You got the own tournament, which we'll get into momentarily here. I know you're a fan of tournaments. We definitely want to analyze the brackets and the developments there, and also start to look ahead to the next pay-per-view.
So, Kyle, I got to respectfully disagree with you. I thought the storytelling in this episode was very clear, and it was centered around introducing one group to the main event, which was the Ops. You start the episode by having a member of the Ops face off against the Death Riders. You see the fallout from that move into the main event, and then, of course, the post-match promo by a pissed-off Samoa Joe, which, makes me quake in fear through my TV screen, that fully sets up that we have a new contender for the Trios titles, especially with Double or Nothing having the trademark Anarchy in the Arenas match, with Swerve not willing to let his beef with the Death Riders go, with a couple other players starting to confront John Moxley on the road to All In. It feels like this episode's main motivation was to solidify the players for Anarchy in the Arena. And on that note, I think they did very, very well. I think the Town Hall segments, which historically I'm not a big fan of in AEW because AEW has a much looser promo style, and those Town Hall segments tend to ramble on and on. I think that both the Learning Tree segment and the Hurt Syndicate felt like they had a point to make. They made that point. They did not overstay their welcome, and they set up the future very, very interestingly. I thought overall this was one of the better episodes of Dynamite this year if you are strictly looking for story progression.
Yep. Yeah, I enjoyed this episode, and it had different. I was thinking about, what to talk about at the top of the show. I mean, we have to go with the world title finish and the Bucks returning, but it was like there's other candidates. None of them just jumped out as like, if it weren't for the opening segment, there wasn't something obvious to go with, but there were a good number of developments and talking points. As we're talking about Ricochet, the chat lit up with some comments on that. Scott,
this is going to be good.
Scott TPA said, I love the Ricochet spot where he flipped over the top rope, landed on his feet, and then got 4 slaps on his head. King of Strong Style says, I know people like Ricochet like this, but is he supposed to be a main event heel or just a comedy guy? Because it feels like a comedy guy and not serious. Someone else compared him to, King of Strong Style, not someone else, just said, is Ricochet the new R-Truth, and is that good? But Kyle Fassel counters, they got to start with heel Ricochet. Could be a world champ sooner than later. Tej, project where this version can go.
So I think that the reason Ricochet is able to get away with as many comedic moments as he does is they took the time to portray him as a babyface who is among the best in the world in ring. So now that he's leaned into this comedic, snaky, like violent version of himself, it's backed up with an element of danger because you know that he is so good at what he does in the ring. It's the equivalent of the quiet kid in class. Like, on the exterior, they seem harmless. They're not really outwardly dangerous, but you give them a little bit of a wide berth because you know they've got some darkness in them that could come out. And that's where I think that, unlike certain other players, Ricochet can be comedic and still be plausible in the upper mid card because he just has that legacy behind him. And, we've been talking, the last time I was here, we spoke about Max Caster and how not having that legacy and not being particularly strong by AEW standards in the ring was causing him to sink perhaps a little bit lower than AEW intends in terms of being a comedy act. Ricochet, I don't think, has that issue because hardcore fans know his history in Dragon Gate and in New Japan and whatnot, and even casual fans that only started watching him in AEW, they got those incredible matches with Ospreay. They got to see him in the Continental Classic. That's why I think it was very, very smart for him to have that brief babyface run that he did have before they turned him heel.
Yep. All right. Speedball comments too. Speedball apparently went on social media. Dougie Doug says he tweeted, I'm rich at 10:07 p.m., which is exactly how I hoped he would sell this big win. Standard Deviation says he can finally buy some shoes. Tej, tell me about Speedball. What do you think about him?
I think that it's almost surreal to think he's only been in AEW for what like 2 or 3 months. He fits the environment like such a glove, and it feels like he's been here from the very beginning. He can stand up with almost any of the top guys in the ring. I think that his presentation is, while not explicitly befitting a top guy, it is very clear in what it's trying to achieve. I think that he's proven that he can engage with people on the mic, which was always a danger of his work in TNA. From what I'm told, he didn't get a lot of speaking time. You know, his promos are basic, but they get the job done. I think he has the making to be a mainstay in the upper mid card, flirt with the world title program here and there. I think that at least from the start, they've done a very, very good job integrating Speedball into AEW.
And he stands out. You know, there's some interchangeableness with certain, you know, mid card AEW wrestlers who come from the indie scene, short, dark hair. You know, average or below average in size, and they are really solid workers, but they're not particularly memorable. Speedball's memorable, and you can imagine someone going, I want to wear a Speedball t-shirt to the next wrestling show I go to, and people will know this is a guy that I'm into. Same thing with Mark Briscoe. Derek Mitchell says Mark Briscoe equals Mick Foley, a very likable personality. And that's, you know, Speedball has that you know, being likable going for him. I don't think there's, you know, and I respect the hell out of some of the mid-carders in AEW in the work, and they have good matches, but, you know, Roderick Strong tried to do some comedy, and it didn't, you know, it didn't land the way Chad Gable is, and it didn't land the way Ricochet is as a heel. I mean, I don't know. And I was sort of defending some of the stuff Roderick was doing, but I mean, there's just, Speedball jumps out. Like, he's just this, you know, relatively little guy out there doing a karate taekwondo style gimmick, and you kind of know who he is pretty quick. There's not a lot there to him, but that's okay for the role that he has to play. You know, I guess there's a little bit of art, you know, maybe an R-Truth type thing with him, except he's gonna I don't know. Speedball. There's actually not a real good comparison there. So let's talk about Jericho for a moment. Zach Barber says, we're bearing the lead, people. Jericho is gone at long last. Rejoice. Standard Deviation said, I read that Fozzy has 22 dates booked. Did this seem like Jericho being written off for a while? Is this, because I don't know if this was his last date or not, but you know, the way he bashed his TV screen in says it's the end of the learning tree, and then smashing stuff and getting an SUV and driving out. Symbolically, that certainly just is telling the audience, if you haven't read and you don't know, this might be the last we see of him for a while. He's very disappointed in Big Bill.
See, this is where, and this may be me reading too much into things, I don't think Jericho's quite finished with this run yet, because it feels like there was intentionally a lot more left to say between him and Big Bill. Mm-hmm. I think that, you know, Jericho's known, he loves to swerve the audience. He loves to, you know, set something up blatantly and then go against it. The sheer amount of finality in this segment that said, no, this is done. I'm going away. Look, here's a second segment of me walking to my car and getting driven off because I'm going away. Mm-hmm. It feels like he is gearing up to surprise us all by cutting Big Bill and Brian Keith's next endeavor or next shot at, you know, solo glory at the legs, and then we get the burn-off feud between Bill and Jericho that we've all wanted. Because at the crux of the segment tonight was Jericho's internalized jealousy that not only could he not get what he wanted, but that Big Bill's calling him out and knocking him off his perch, that Bill's being loved by the audience and he's not. There's a level of that there, and I don't think Jericho, the character in kayfabe, would be quite willing to let that go. I think that you're going to start to see a babyface push for Big Bill and hopefully Brian Keith as well. I know he was caught in the middle a little bit tonight, and I think you might see Jericho come back to nuclear heat, stop Big Bill from, you know, potentially winning a title or winning a title shot, and then following that program, we'll finally see Jericho go. If Jericho was gone after this week, I feel like a lot of missed opportunity was there to really put a final button on the learning tree. It feels like, all right, Big Bill doesn't like him, and he's gone.
Did they leave the door open? You know, Big Bill's like, I don't want to be a punching bag. I don't want to be disrespected. I didn't sign up for that. I signed up to learn from you. And he goes, and Brian Keith feels the same way. And then Jericho asked him, how did you interpret the dynamic with Bill and Keith, especially if we do see more of Jericho before the end of the learning tree?
I think that, you know, whether they'll follow up on it is one thing, but it feels like there is a little bit of drama to be mined on whose side will Brian Keith choose. It's a very, very, you know, classic dynamic when you have a faction split or a faction war. I do think that, you know, we will get Brian Keith siding with Big Bill because there is an opportunity for a monster pop when Brian Keith hints that he might go back with Jericho, which gives Jericho a vehicle to be on TV more, and then says, nope, go away. I'm siding with Bill. You will undoubtedly get the crowd on their feet because Chris Jericho, legacy aside, people have wanted him to take a break for a very long time. And, you know, I feel like he's not above humiliating himself in that way and coming across as desperate as all that. I think we are due to see a little bit more from him.
What is the position that Big Bill is in now compared to at the beginning of the learning tree? He stood up for himself well tonight. I think he said what a lot of people want people to do in this position, the you know, Mizdow position, the Otis position. Stop being abused by your mentor. And Bill did so in a way that didn't seem super cliche. It was like, I have a lot to learn from you, but I don't want to be berated. I don't want to be publicly humiliated. That's not what I signed up for. People want to see, if you expect to break away from a heel who's being abusive and demeaning, fans want you to show spine and not belabor it. I don't think we're to the belaboring point where people lose respect for Big Bill. I think that happened with Damian Sandow, with Miz. They just waited too long. Otis never had a pure moment like that really, I think, landed, and I think fans would have liked it a little bit sooner than the kind of half-baked way they did it. So with Bill, where do you think he is compared to the beginning? My original question. Then two, do you think he has potential? Did he show you something more tonight? The crowd was chanting Bill, Bill, Bill. I don't know if that makes them think maybe I should have picked a better wrestling name than Big Bill. So yeah, your thoughts on his progress and his potential.
Well, first off, I'm just going to say I vastly prefer Big Bill to W. Morrissey, so we're already the bar is set very low, and he's already rising above it. I think that Big Bill has benefited the most from being with Jericho since Jericho's inception in AEW. He feels like the first person that really unlocked a new level of promo, aside from potentially Daniel Garcia, but even Daniel Garcia suffered from like a lot of iffy booking after leaving the Jericho Appreciation Society up until like mid 2024. But I think Big Bill, he's unlocked a level of humor and charm that he didn't really know that at least the AEW audience didn't really know that he had. I think that he genuinely has gotten much better on the mic. I think the same thing for Brian Keith. I loved Brian Keith in DPW, but he didn't really do much there but scowl. And seeing him kind of get a little bit loony has added a lot to his character, and he's been able to go back and forth between the bounty hunter and the bad apple pretty seamlessly. I think that Big Bill could be set up for a mid-card title run if AEW plays their cards right. I think that, you know, for those of us that know his real life story to sobriety and getting his life back together, he has all of the tools necessary to really thrive as a solo act. And I'm giving Jericho his props. I think Jericho has given him a launch pad to thrive and not get lost in the shuffle.
Should he change his name from Big Bill to something better?
No.
Really?
I don't think so. I think that Big Bill, there's an old school kind of charm to it. It feels like a name that would come straight out of the territories. It rolls off the tongue. You know, it's, who am I? I'm Big Bill. It suits him, you know? He's not a guy
I lived through when Hulk Hogan left the AWA and went to the WWF to become, I mean, he's already selling a lot of buildings. Hulkamania was running wild, and the AWA, Vince McMahon, just sort of bought a finished product, even though he likes to say he created Hulkamania. He left, and then Scott Hall was called up from Florida, and he was the new Hulk Hogan. They pushed him. initially as that. They thought he looked like Magnum PI, who was like Tom Selleck, who had a big TV series at that time. But his nickname was Big Scott Hall. Big Scott Hall. Like, big is a nickname that like your neighbor gives to you if you're taller than him. Like, oh, there's big, like, come on, it's pro wrestling. That was not inspiring. And it comes across like you can't be bothered to put more thought into something more creative. I think there is a character where Big works if you're doing sort of a mid-card Western gimmick. Oh, it's Big Bill, and he's, a gunslinger with a cowboy hat, or I don't know. But like, if you want to be taken seriously, make it seem like you took your gimmick seriously. It's like Mr. JL, like, oh, Jerry Lynn, you're in our mask now. What should we call you? Oh, we don't really have time to think about it. Let's just call you Mr. JL. Like, I mean, I don't know. I would be for, even if it's Big Bill Morrissey, I'd be better with that. But when it's just Big Bill and nothing else, I don't know. It just feels unimaginative. Like nobody could be bothered to put thought into it.
I mean, I get that, but there's always this, every now and then you get this intangible feeling of, oh, this kind of works. It works for him. And I could buy that Big Bill the wrestler came up with that name and thought that it was cool. It lends him a level of earthiness and kind of boy next door quality, feels like the wrong word, but I don't know. In the same way that Wardlow works for Wardlow, and people called him Mr. Wardlow, and that worked. WWE's got Big Bronson Reed, and they nail that. There's something
I don't
about
think they nailed
Big
that either, but I feel the same way about Big Bronson Reed. It's like stop saying Big as a nickname in pro wrestling.
It is fair, but it's just goofy enough to be plausible for me, and somehow it's done the job where, I hear the name Big Bill, I think of that face. It doesn't take away from his presentation in its current state, so I'm happy with it.
The Redwood is, to me, better, like to try to play off of that got introduced. Sure. I thought they were going to move him away from it. All right. I don't want to, I think we covered that sufficiently. Do want to note, Standard Deviation said Fozzie's last date on tour is May 12th. Double or Nothing is May 25th. So there could be more.
Well, he doesn't take time off during Fozzie dates anyway. He always leaves Wednesdays off so he can come back for Dynamite.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. More guys, if you're curious about that, go look at the Fozzie dates. There's never a Wednesday on there.
Wow. Standard Deviation, by the way, getting back to Speedball, says Kevin Knight blended in and Speedball stood out. Kyle Fessel said Speedball has a great head of hair too. Great mullet. Derek Mitchell said Speedball's character is defined while some of those other indie guys just wrestle with no personality. Kyle says, I think they need some Speedball vignettes breaking pieces of wood at a karate dojo in a strip mall. So some good ideas from the chat there. On
Chad, if anyone here hasn't seen an indie film called The Art of Self-Defense, it's basically if Speedball Mike Bailey was an entire movie. Go check out that movie, The Art of Self-Defense.
Awesome. Let's talk about the latest development with the Hurt Business and MJF. We had the celebration of retaining the tag team titles. They're all about to toast MJF, Shelton, and Bobby, and then MJF comes out and joins a party like he's already been accepted by them. And then MVP informs him it's a vote. It's unanimous. Bobby doesn't even get to vote because Shelton does a thumbs down. MVP gives a thumbs up. MJF is not happy about it. He thought, I thought we were cool. I thought we were cool, man. MJF says, crestfallen when Shelton voted thumbs down. So I was like, okay, I'm good. We're moving on from this. I don't know that there's a lot more to do. It'd be, MVP. We know MVP wants MJF. Bobby and Shelton know better. There's no new piece of information that should change Bobby and Shelton's mind. MJF is who he is. But then it did get revisited a little bit later in the show in a way that made it seem like there might be some, a more of a pitch that MJF is going to make to try to change their minds. And, MVP just said, why are they treating me like a bitch? Do they know who I am? And then MVP had a great line, which is, that's the problem. They know who you are. So, Tej, just tell me what you thought the highs and lows, pros and cons were of this post-Dynasty chapter in the MJF Hurt Business dynamic.
So I've loved the dynamic between MJF and the Hurt Syndicate because it's a welcome change from MJF's programs for the past year, which have largely been one-on-one. He's been the heel. He puts over the babyface at the end. in a grudge feud away from the title scene, which is rare in AEW. There's not a lot of people that can make that work in a company where they have had an increased focus on having gold around your waist. MJF has done that. He did it for Ospreay, he did it for Garcia, did it for Hangman, and he did it for Adam Cole. This is a very, very different dynamic from him, and it feeds. It's a great segue from his work with Hangman that really emphasized the theme of MJF. At the end of the day, he's just a scared kid that wants to be loved and hasn't gotten it from anyone. So putting him in this kind of begging role where he wants to be a part of the crew and he keeps getting rebuffed because they know who he is deep down, it was really, really interesting. And that's why this segment really, really got me excited, because what does MJF do historically whenever he's been scorned? He goes on the warpath. So I think this laid the seeds for an MJF versus Hurt Syndicate feud, perhaps MJF getting his own heaters, and we do a little 3 versus 3 faction war in the same way that we did with the Pinnacle back in the day. I think that this was a very, very interesting way to set up the Hurt Syndicate having some dangerous enemies, and it feeds into a theme that has caused some of the best AEW feuds in history, which is sometimes you unleash a monster you can't control. Bobby Lashley turned down MJF, and he may have made an enemy that could be very, very dangerous for him.
If MJF gets partners, and I would think it would be one partner to go after the tag titles. Is there someone who jumps out as a good fit for MJF to align with at this point to do that? And maybe it ends up being a singles feud with Bobby or something like that. But if it is a tag team title feud, is there someone who jumps out?
I mean, obviously FTR, because of the history with the Pinnacle. Crew feels like they could get along with MJF fighting mutual enemies, Lio Rush and Action Andretti. But there's also the potential to really elevate a team that's been making some waves on ROH or in the undercard by, just saying, MJF, yeah, I needed extra body, so I got these guys, which frankly would work for his character. He's not someone that likes to ally with people because he trusts them. So just a quick little segment of MJF flashing a little cash and saying, like, all right, you guys work for me now. I think that could be a great way to get more people some airtime.
And I'm thinking what individual can team with MJF, though, because I think if MJF's not in the world title picture or a singles picture, and he goes after the tag titles, not trios, but 2-on-2, I'm just, someone, Kyle Fassel said maybe Wardlow comes back. That's where FTR doesn't work, because FTR would be a trios feud. And you can do MVP and Bobby and Shelton against them. That's fine. But if he goes after the tag titles, again, I don't have an answer. I just was like, is there someone that's intriguing where like, oh, MJF goes, you reject me, well, you're going to be sorry. Look, and it could be, look who's back, Wardlow, or a heel who's out there who isn't really assigned in our minds to something, incompatible, like Jack Perry wouldn't make sense, or, so yeah.
I mean, the one reason I will disagree with you regarding FTR is I could definitely see MJF, recruiting FTR winning the titles, and MJF still feeling victorious because he said, I don't care about having the belts. I care that you don't have them because you turned me down. Now your life is worse. That's consistent with his character. I could see that being the angle if they put him with an established team, because
I don't
after the Brochachos in 2023, I feel like any mileage of MJF being in an odd couple tag team with someone, it would feel like it's kind of rehashing those beats, which I know it leaves a sour taste in people's mouths because of the way the narrative ended, but up until All In 2023, that was the hottest act in the company, and it was great stuff.
So I agree. Like if MJF just goes, hey, let's get the band back together with FTR, whatever. I mean, like let's hang out again. You guys destroy these people. I'm gonna go after singles titles, but I want FTR to take you out. I mean, whatever. They can sure. Definitely, I don't disagree with that. It was more just a thought exercise. What if that doesn't happen and MJF does team up with someone? How do you avoid it looking like an Adam Cole thing again? And, Todd Martin talked about this a lot. Like, you can be entertained by what Cole and MJF did, but also don't be in denial that from a tone standpoint, it coincides with a complete change in how people looked at AEW, because it was
100%.
very sports entertainment-y, and it even if it didn't just crash and burn, tone wise, it
was not true to AEW now.
And there's just a lot of things that I think are entertaining, but I always run it through a filter in my head. Okay, I'm entertained by it, but that's not the litmus test for whether it should be on television or not. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that are entertaining that are not good for business. And AEW kind of, a lot of people just thought this isn't what I signed up for. And when that press release came out and said we're going to be a counter to Vince McMahon style wrestling, it just felt like Tony Khan saying, rubber stamping any idea that people had when they wanted to audition for WWE or show their range as an actor, or try to be more entertaining than just kind of sticking to the basics. And some people are just best when they stick to the basics. I mean, MJF, I think, just tried too hard to be, super entertaining. And it's like, just be a heel who people want to see get their ass kicked. Play your role. It's like Rudy Gobert doesn't go for 3-point shots. It's like, that's not your role. It's like, it just do you know who Rudy Gobert is?
Know your role and shut your mouth.
Yeah.
I had to. Sorry, it was low hanging fruit.
Yep, exactly. So, but I think this storyline has been played well in terms of MJF going, hey, we go way back. I like you, but we're a team. MJF calling Bobby Lashley Bob, Shelton being a little bit more diplomatic and Bobby Lashley not having any time for him. I mean, I do like this. There's some scar tissue for directions MJF goes, but I don't think this is inherently, something that's bad right now.
I agree.
Yeah. All right. Let's go to an email here. JB from Detroit always brings it. He says, I like that the Bucks had a legitimate explanation for why they cost Swerve the title at Dynasty, which was because of the pretense that they thought it would be what their friend Hangman Page would have wanted, when in reality it was because they were last seen in AEW running in fear of the Death Riders, and they wanted to impress them with the intent of joining forces to avoid their wrath. Did JB just explain that better than AEW did, or do you think everybody watched that and said, yeah, that's what happened there? They're being weasels because they want to befriend people, a heel group that they're scared of. So I'll start with that, and then I want to get into Swerve and the Swerve Hangman Prince Nana dynamic too.
I mean, I think that, JB got it perfectly. I think that it just came across a little, like we said earlier on, it came across a little muddled because they explained all of that in one long promo. And, I'm willing to give it another week or two to really iron out all the character nuances before I call it muddled storytelling. But I think JB nailed the intent of the storyline right on the head.
It's okay to say there's work to do. I mean,
plenty of it.
Barber might run in and say, how dare you? But sometimes there's work to do. And what week
one is Don't be harsh. Don't be harsh. Come on. Come
on. Zach can take it. If he's still here, he can take it. All right, number 2 from JB from Detroit. I also like how Kenny highlighted that during his absence, he realized that his values and the Bucks no longer are aligned. And he referenced that the Bucks were last seen in AEW shredding evidence of their privilege and power. Again, I just think the Bucks were gone for so long. They needed to do a better job. And I just don't think Tony Khan is interested in doing this. And then people who just in a knee-jerk way to the detriment of AEW don't want AEW to do anything that WWE does well. But this would have been a good time for a video package and say, the Young Bucks returned. Last time we saw them was this. This is what they were doing the last time we saw them months and months ago. And now they came back, and then you ask questions. Jim Ross always talked about that. The job of an announcer is to get fans thinking about what you want them thinking about by asking questions. And a video package where there's a narrator, and it could be Renee Young or Tony Schiavone or Jim Ross narrating and going, the Bucks came back, they did this. Why did they do it? What's their motivation? Give people a couple options. Do they want to align with them? Are they scared? Whatever. Just whatever you want fans thinking. You don't have to answer the issue. Let the wrestlers do that. Let it play out. But ask the questions to guide us so we know what the question is. Mm-hmm. Clearly no, with Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns and CM Punk, Seth Rollins is like, can you, you say you can be loyal to them. Are they loyal to you? Punk says, I just want to earn money and not make friends. Is that a guy who's really your best friend? Can you really trust him? Roman Reigns treats you like crap. So we know the issue is, did what Seth said resonate with Heyman? Who's Heyman going to side with? Did some of that stuff change the way Heyman looks at things? That's all apparent. Let's do some of that with the Bucks and and the Death Riders, and Kenny can be a part of that, or the announcers can.
Yeah, I mean, you could even have Shivani call it out of the desk. He did that with FTR this week, which worked to great effect because you don't see the announcers really getting involved and offering their input to that level. But that little, very passionate speech that Tony Schiavone gave, that really put FTR over as absolute evil bastards. So well done, Schiavone. But just even a quick thing like, we've been gotten word the Young Bucks are in the building. They've called all staff meetings. This is the first time we've seen them since they seemingly hid evidence and then flew off to Japan, leaving AEW in flux. What do they have to say? I'm sure we'll find out at some point tonight.
Lady B said, I saw someone called this a Tony Khan apology show, and I found that funny, but not sure how accurate it is. They gave answers, but it was still messy. There's another... Oh, go ahead.
I don't know about apology. I feel like explanation.
Yeah.
Main event of Dynasty just introduced all these new players, and this is him saying, wait. Hear me out. This is where we're going with this.
Somebody in the chat, and I can't find it, mentioned Kenny saying, that Nick is still 90 pounds. And what did he say about Matt? I was trying to recall his...
something about his pearls, wasn't it?
I
don't remember.
Nick looks every bit of that 90 pounds you were before you left, and Matt looks about as red as Nick's lapels.
That's what it was.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know that saying Nick is 90 pounds is helpful. Kenny's not supposed to be helpful in canon, but he shouldn't be damaging in a way that undercuts, the Bucks in a way that maybe people go, yeah, Nick is sort of so small, he's non-threatening. I don't know.
I don't know. To me, it was so over the top that it just felt like, okay, yeah, he's there. They're not heavyweights. Cool.
Yeah.
I thought that if he said oh, you're still a featherweight, you could barely make lightweight, and like it was like somewhat closer to reality, then it would have been damaging. Just the fact he's at 90 pounds, I'm just like, okay, that's an insult, and okay.
Yeah. You can exaggerate to a point that it just doesn't.
It takes the bite out of it when you exaggerate. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So let's see where was I gonna go with that? Oh, Hangman and Swerve. We had the Prince Nana moment. Tej, tell me about what you think of that.
Hangman and Swerve. I think Hangman Page is doing the best character work in all of AEW. I think that we've seen him slowly be on this babyface turn, but he's not quite willing to let himself forgive Swerve. So seeing Prince Nana come out and say like, "Hey, I regret what happened," he goes, "No, you're not allowed to do that." Because I know that if you show remorse, I'm at a point now where I will forgive you, and I do not want to forgive you. Mm-hmm. And it's also somehow in keeping with Prince Nana's character. There were times during Swerve's heel run, especially during the segment where he broke into Hangman's house, Nana was the one saying like, "Boss, I don't know about this. This is going too far." And Swerve was the one who said like, no, shut up and hold the camera. So it felt real. It felt earned from all parties. And I think it really sold the eventual apology that we will get. We are leading to Hangman and Swerve team up, it feels like, against the Bucks, which is an absolute dynamite match across AEW's main event scene. It's something I'm very, very much looking forward to. And Tony Khan has straight up done an enemies to lovers arc with Hangman and Swerve. And it's working gangbusters because these two have been able to tell a story over the course of a year. Every character evolution feels earned, it feels consistent, and it feels like it's leading to something. I think this is, pound for pound, the best feud that AEW has ever done.
The Swerve said, and it was kind of hard to pick up on, it's kind of a big thing to say for the first time after Dynasty and do it when the mic's not right in front of you, clearly, but he talked about blood and guts. Have you assembled what that match can be in your mind, Tej?
I mean, it's hard to say because in the past few years, Blood and Guts has often served as the answer to Anarchy in the Arena. Anarchy in the Arena, the heels have gotten the win in 2022 and 23. Blood and Guts, the babyfaces get their win back, and that's how we move into, the programs in the fall. It feels like Blood and Guts has the potential to be something different this year. I know people have hoped that we get a women's Blood and Guts because we finally got enough intertwining stories in the women's division that feels plausible. I do think it hints at, Swerve captaining another version of a team AEW against the Death Riders or against the Bucks or whatever permutation they come up with. and, you know, maintaining his role as like one of AEW's kind of crown jewels across the baby faces. But I wasn't sure exactly what to make of it.
Yeah. By the way, the comment about the comments from Kenny was from James earlier. You weigh 90 pounds, Dookie, and Young Bucks killed the company. It sounded like Jim Cornette wrote it. Awful.
It did, actually. You know, those super childlike, dumb-sounding insults that Jim Cornette has for like Orange Cassidy and things like that. It did kind of sound like that.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I like the Swerve Hangman dynamic. I mean, it's tough when you do the, you know, home invasion, burn down on home thing, and they're owning it instead of running away from it. They're owning it without drawing undue attention to it. But you know, like you said, they're enemies, and then, you know, I thought, by the way, Prince Nana has shown, including tonight lately, more range than he was given a chance to do, and I think he's stepping up and delivering effectively in his in a role that isn't just kind of the dancing,
the hype,
you know,
man.
the hype man thing. There's more to his acting, which is nice. I haven't heard an update on Pac, by the way, but he hurt his leg on a buckle bomb, screeched in pain, and you could just see Swerve looks at him like, oh, that, you know, like it wasn't selling. Yeah, like I better. And then, you know, the ref checked on him. I thought it was classy. It showed heart. It showed, for him to be able to roll back into the ring, hop on one leg, eat a kick, and then take the Swerve stomp and lose. Well, he knows he's got what could be a serious injury. We don't know, but enough to cut the match short. He could have just stayed out of the ring and said, I can't stand, and took a count out. But, you know, for a guy who had a reputation of, you know, at one point not wanting to do jobs and being real protective, I mean, that was being a company guy and putting over Swerve even with that injury. Obviously in 4 minutes, the match was, you know, going to go longer than that. I sure hope it would, because how many matches where you know the outcome ahead of time go 8 to 15? You don't want Pac losing in 4 to Swerve by design. So anyway, that's another thing. Yeah. Another thing that happened on that show. Okay, so back to JB's email. If the plan was to always have Ospreay win the title at All In, then I definitely understand Swerve not winning the title at Dynasty. Ultimately, I'd much rather have Ospreay take the title off of a clear heel in Texas, and I don't want Swerve having another short-term title reign. If that's a plan, I don't think that a few more months at the Death Riders will make or break anything. Yeah, I mean, I think that's a plan.
Yeah. And, you know, Swerve made a lot of sense as the next title contender because they understand that fan investment in the Death Riders is not where it should be. And, you know, the more times you do the same shtick at a pay-per-view, the less times people are going to be interested in it. How do you counteract that with one of the most over baby faces that you have at your disposal? That was like the best way they could have injected as much life as they did into this program with a 1 month build. I think it was a smart decision. I don't think the plan was ever for Swerve to win. I think that, you know, the plan has always been to get this to All In and unseat this hated heel at your biggest show of the year. Mm-hmm. But, you know, I do think the plan is Mox does not walk out of All In as champion.
Yeah. JB also says, is the closing segment of especially, which we haven't spent much time on at all, is this leading to Moxley versus Samoa Joe for the AEW title at some point, potentially at Double or Nothing, if not before? So we had the Ops. We're kind of wondering going into Dynasty, what did Joe mean when he goes, we're going to be watching, you better step up or we'll be there. You know, just laying the groundwork for something, and then something happened, and then tonight something more happens, and we had a show closing angle with the Ops getting the better of Mox and his crew. So yeah, where do you think this is headed? And I mean, I'll sign up for Mox versus Samoa Joe.
I mean, that match is going to be absolutely killer. I think that the eventual goal is the Ops taking the trios titles because they are one of the hottest trios in AEW right now, and they have been pushed as such consistently in a way that not a lot of trios have. You know, they've shown that they have the Death Riders number in a way that not a lot of other groups do. I think Mox versus Joe is going to be a nice kind of side quest to get us there. I don't see it happening in a pay-per-view simply because Double or Nothing, I think it's a safe bet the Death Riders will be involved in Anarchy in the Arena. Therefore, I see the Ops being there too. I don't see a solo title defense for Mox at that time. However, you know, they've got Fyter Fest coming up. They've got Spring Breakthrough coming up. I could see a little filler title defense, Mox versus Joe, happening there.
Yeah, I agree with that assessment. JB says, I enjoyed Tony Schiavone's soliloquy tonight on his disappointment and disapproval of FTR's despicable betrayal and beatdown of Copeland at Dynasty. I like when the commentators take a relatable moral stand on an angle and do a good job of calling proper attention to it. Yeah, I thought that was handled well, and Tony did good work there. Any thoughts, Tej, on that and the angle itself?
I mean, we talked about that a little bit there. I think, it's another imaginative way to kind of recap a storyline without having your main players there. There's only so many kind of, like you said, recaps, video packages that you can do. So having an announcer kind of break form, speak to the camera and say, this was terrible and you guys should be ashamed. It gets you invested because it's not a format that AEW often does. They don't often have their commentators speaking directly to the performers into the camera. I liked it. And, Tony Schiavone's got some acting chops. The man's been doing this since the WCW days. He's one of the GOATs.
Regarding Pac, the poor guy just can't catch a break. I wonder how this is JB's email. I wonder how this affects future Death Rider storylines that they are obviously building to, including the Trios title match with the Ops. The Ops winning the main event and subsequent Samoa Joe promo was obviously after the Pac injury, so they were aware of this. Does Mox just take over as a third Death Rider, or do they add a third member? Maybe Jack Perry, after the Bucks hinted at a Death Riders alliance and Perry's association with the Bucks. Tej, any thoughts on that?
I mean, there's a couple different ways this could go. I think it's pretty clear that Mox's interference in the main event was originally meant to be Pac, at least, initially. I think that there's a couple really interesting options. Obviously, Mox's other young boy is currently going through an existential crisis over in New Japan Pro Wrestling. That man is Shota Umino. Forbidden Doors on the horizon. You could start with Shota making some appearances out west, helping his old father figure. They've laid the groundwork for that at Wrestle Dynasty, where we had Shota versus Claudio. Jack Perry is another option. For those of you, again, who don't watch much New Japan Pro Wrestling, the Bucks' last appearance actually wasn't them shedding documents. They made a few appearances in Japan, but they actually showed up to help Jack Perry at Strong Style Evolved last December. And in the backstage comments, Jack Perry said, "Where the hell have you guys been? Why haven't you been helping me? You left me alone." And they didn't answer him. So there is somewhat of a dissent being sowed there. We've seen Mox at least be impressed by Jack Perry. So I think the Jack Perry returning to aid the Death Riders could be a great pivot. It's hard to say. Or maybe they just go with 4. Marina Shafir gets in on the action. She's made her fair share of enemies in the women's division. And, the crowd came alive when Swerve kicked her in the face. Make of that what you will. So there's a couple different ways things can go.
JB also says, are we getting the Bucks and Okada versus Hangman, Swerve, and Kenny at some point? Makes sense.
That would be a Tony Khan special. It's almost too good of a 6-man not to put together at some point. I don't know when they do it. Maybe that happens at Spring Breakthrough as well, which is already looking to be a loaded card because it looks like we get Mercedes versus Athena happening there. But I think it's fair to say we get that 6-man at some point.
All right. He also says, I like that MJF had a heel reason for why he told Tony Khan he wasn't wrestling in the Owen Hart tournament, and it stays true to his character. He said he wrestles harder, not smarter. He's not a schmuck who's going to wrestle every week. If you want a gimmick in life, have the gimmick be you get paid full-time pay to work part-time. And yeah, I mean, it was a good line from MJF, and it's his way of saying I would have been in the Owen. I was invited, and I turned him down because I've got other ways to
I'm better than you. Simple, yeah.
Yeah. How does MJF earn Lashley's thumbs up? Does he even care to, or is this all some sort of means to another end for him? If so, what is it? I don't know the pace of things right now. I just am glad Lashley wasn't hemming and hawing, and I mean, it's just like, let's just establish there against him being in the group. Lashley going, I didn't see you interfere, as a way to kind of stay babyface. Like, I didn't want to win that way. I wouldn't have taken pride in winning that way, but now that I saw we won that way, he said he didn't get the job done. So yeah, what happens next?
I mean, I'd like to think, for the reasons I talked about earlier, that MJF winds up not joining the Hurt Syndicate. He goes on the warpath against them. If for no other reason, that MJF versus Bobby Lashley is a much bigger marquee match than anything I can think of where MJF winds up joining them. I think that MJF versus Lashley could be great at Double or Nothing, could be great at, whatever special event, or even at All In. I think that could be a great way to give MJF, a big match, get him on the card without reinserting him into the title scene as a late addition.
We will parlay a couple email comments here into a discussion of the women's Owen Hart Cup brackets and then get into the men's. And that might be our final two topics here. So JB said, why is Penelope Ford acting as Megan Bain's mouthpiece? It seems backwards to me. What do you think of that comment?
I mean, it feels just like, a way to establish more alliances in the women's division, which can only aid your storytelling. A lot of times what limited women's airtime was that each of them felt like their own little solo bubbles that could only interact with so many other pieces with the limited time they were given. I think that this is doing wonders for Penelope Ford's characterization. There's just so much comedy in the stoic badass that has a short little chattermouth with them. And, the fact that they're not even entertaining that Megan Bain respects her at all just adds to the comedy. It allows her to be a little runt, but, she has to hide behind Megan herself. Megan will never go and help her on her own. It's an entertaining dynamic. I don't know if it's meant to be anything more than that. I don't know if it's planned to be anything more than that right now, but Penelope Ford on my screen is entertaining me. So in the short term, I'm happy with that. That's all the rope I'm willing to give it for right now.
Zach emailed and said, in my column today at PWTorch, I said that Tony Khan had two choices when it came to Toni Storm, Megan Bain, and the women's side of the Owen Hart tournament. Unfortunately, it looks like he selected the wrong one. Toni Storm basically got lucky at Dynasty, yet Megan Bain doesn't want an immediate rematch. Make that make sense. Well, she lost. That's why you lose. She lost clean. I mean, it was the leverage pin, but I mean, she lost. You don't get a rematch when you lose. That's easy. I mean, to say she got lucky, I mean, she scored a 3 count, and it's a legit way to win. I don't think that's luck. Now, it looks like Bain, someone who's built up as an unstoppable monster, is just another woman on the roster. On top of that, the first time we ever have a match between Mercedes and Athena is likely happening on free TV next week, which is insane. All of this gets to a Mercedes-Tony match, which will only create problems for whoever wins it. Whether it's Hogan Warrior in 90 or Hogan Goldberg in 98, the champion versus champion thing results in the secondary title being vacated. Lord knows we don't need another tournament so soon after the Owen. This just has bad idea written all over it. Zach being critical of AEW here. So Tej, respond to any of that.
So in theory, I agree. I don't think a Tony Mercedes should happen until one of them has lost their current belts. Here's why I don't think they're going that route immediately is Athena's hometown is Texas. Say what you want about her being relegated to ROH, but she has built up a mystique and a level of stardom there by being the only ROH exclusive act and being the forever champ that no one else in AEW really has now. I think that the plan is for Athena to have a marquee match for a belt at All In. I think the two most likely candidates for said match are Tony and Mercedes. Those are the two links we've slightly begun to build up. So I think we get one of those two matches while the other champ, in either Tony or Mercedes, defends against somebody else. There's plenty of time for me at least, there's plenty of time to establish who that other person would be, but I don't think we get Tony and Mercedes quite yet. I think that one gets left in the chamber a little bit longer.
Yeah, I'm not ruling out Harley somehow advancing and facing Mercedes and the Mercedes-Athena match being teased for next week, but not actually happening. We can see. So, Tej, just tell me about the brackets and what the distinct possibilities are and your pick for the Owen Women's Tournament based on what we know right now. Jamie Hayter, Billy Starks. We had the Thunder Rosa Chris Statlander result tonight. We got Mercedes advancing over Julia, and then the Harley Athena match still to come. And a pretty loaded collision, by the way.
Absolutely. Collision with 2, potentially 3 matches here, slowly becoming a way for, the Owens Hart Cup to continue. I absolutely love that. I do think, the two heavy hitters are Mercedes and Athena. The way the brackets work, we're getting that match in the semifinals if we get it at all. So I think the winner of that match goes on to win the entire thing. With Toni Storm as one of the biggest baby faces now, I don't think you pull off a face versus face match at All In unless you really start pulling some teeth to turn one of the parties heel, which I don't think AEW wants to risk when they don't have a lot of super over baby faces in the women's division at the moment. I think we do get a heel winning. I think it's either Mercedes or Athena. What the permutations are of that, we've talked about already. I don't know which way it's going to go, but I'm very, very excited about it. Just on that note, I do love that the Owen is starting a lot earlier this year. I think that, establishing both the men's and women's world title matches as early as Double or Nothing allows you to do a much more clean, concise build to All In than they have before, especially with Forbidden Door not in the middle, because the build to Forbidden Door always kind of has to be self-sustained because it involves other companies. So plunking that right before the road to the biggest event of the year, it always made the build feel very, very rushed and stilted because you had to set up these stories, stop them for a month, do Forbidden Door, and then start them again. Mm-hmm. So I think that, you're going to see a lot more clean build up to All In this year around. The men's tournament as well, a lot of incredibly interesting matchups there. I think that Hangman Page right now is no longer the front runner for me to win because they've teased that he has a score to settle with the Bucks. He has a score to settle with Swerve. I think that'll keep him occupied for most of the summer. Ospreay, obviously, people have penciled him in as a world champion ever since he got in AEW. I do think now is the time, and it feels like we're slowly circling Ospreay versus Mox at All In, unless Darby Allin has fooled us all and is the wild card entrant. That's the only way I see this changing.
What other wild card possibilities intrigue you, or do you fear?
Yeah. It all depends on when they begin to pull the plug on, or not pull the plug. When do we begin to really accelerate Hangman's narrative with the Bucks? I could see Jack Perry returning as the wild card entrant, screwing over Hangman, and now his sole target is the Elite. I could see Okada inserting himself in. We get Hangman versus Okada, which is a marquee dream match in a company that doesn't have too many of those at this moment. We get Okada having a few more main event style matches, which preps him for his match with Kenny Omega at All In. It gets him away from the goofy bitch that he's been since the early beginnings of the year. Or they could go completely off the wall. They can have, a guy like, trying to think, he could have Christian Cage, he could have Nick Wayne, anyone they want to give a little bit of a shine to in a match against Hangman. There's a lot of possibilities. It doesn't feel as clear-cut as it did last year, where they had a wildcard entrant, was clearly going to be Hangman Page, and it was.
Yeah. I think they want to protect the wild card gimmick as a big reveal. Not necessarily a shock, but a big name. So yeah, and I like the wild card. I mean, Zach Barber brings up Josh Alexander, as someone who's been talked about as a possibility. Just debuting somebody new in that context could work. The problem is, what happens in that match? Do you define Josh down by advancing Hangman? Do you put Josh over huge? Do you have that match tell more of a story that leads to one of them being eliminated, and it's not really a clean finish? That's different. It's a Booker's conundrum.
There's a lot of nuance with a debut.
Yeah. Don Callis tonight said he is accepting invitations to join the Don Callis family because of injuries, kind of writing off Brian Cage and Lance Archer seemingly, or certainly Cage with his injury. Got a little weird when he said they're young, muscular, oiled up, and hot. And I was like, what is going on here? What are we recruiting?
No, that's the homoerotic managers of the 80s that I know and love. That's a classic Paul Ellering moment right there.
So what do you think? Who's a good candidate to join the Don Callis? Is this a Josh Alexander teaser? Is it somebody who's kind of lost in ROH or out on the sidelines?
I mean, far be it from me to indulge in internet fantasy booking, but as I was watching tonight's episode, the commentators did acknowledge the crazy amount of Don Callis clones we've seen in the audience lately. People said if Josh Alexander makes his debut as a Callis clone, that would be the funniest thing on earth. I don't think that's going to happen, but by God, do I want it to happen. It feels like Callis has found a type in terms of, kind of big, beefier boys. Gates of Agony is going on a tear over in ROH. That could be an option. Mm-hmm. It could be a way to bring Sammy Guevara back if that's how, they choose to bring him back to AEW TV. He has a history with the Callis family. There's a couple different options. Or it could have just been an empty tease to, keep Don's character consistent. He's a guy that always has his eyes on glory. He doesn't give a crap about loyalty to his boys.
One other topic, Adam Cole celebrating his TNT title win, Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong talking in that promo too. Anything stand out there for you? And what about the Paragon?
I mean, I do like the name, the Paragon. It definitely feels like the Kingdom, Taven and Bennett, will quietly be future endeavored.
Well, I'll throw in Derek Mitchell says the Undisputed Kingdom has changed their name to the Paragon. Where's Bennett and Taven with zero explanation? AW has a bad habit of having folks disappearing with no explanation. Derek, you've been watching wrestling long enough. You know wrestlers disappear all the time. That's what wrestling magazines were for on the newsstand in the pre-internet newsletter days. Where did that wrestler go? I haven't seen him in weeks. And then you find out they moved to another territory. Wrestling companies are not good about explaining when someone is cut or is being downplayed or sidelined or even injured. AEW doesn't really do, injury reports. Anyway, Tej, go back to what you're saying.
I mean, yep, like Derek said, it feels like Taven and Bennett, their time in AEW has quietly come to an end. We know they're not injured. They worked Maple Leaf Pro recently in a banger of a match for anyone who hasn't seen that. For anyone who hasn't seen that show at MLP Mayhem. I do like the name Paragon because this version of the Undisputed Kingdom stable feels so far away from what they were when they rebranded to the name Undisputed Kingdom.
Yeah.
A name change just goes a long way in cementing to the audience that this is a new chapter in who we are and what we are trying to be. Adam Cole, he works so good as a face with a chip on his shoulder. He's such a great speaker. I didn't think there was anything more to this promo than that. It definitely feels like the TNT title is remaining a Collision staple for the near future, which I think is a great place for it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm excited for the future, cautiously.
I would like Adam Cole to never say the word undisputed or era again in a promo, at least like for 3 years. I've had enough of him. I mean, it's just like it's like he's wearing his high school letter jacket and he's 27 years old. It's like, let's move on. Let's establish something new on national television and not look like your glory days were the black and gold era. And I mean, it just start something new, be new. It's like Jericho shouted down, the chant. Were they chanting Y2J at him when what was the chant when he at the beginning of Dynamite or AEW? And he's like, stop it. This is a new era.
I'm pretty sure it was Y2J.
Yeah. It's like, and Cole's just like leans into it and it's not clever. It's not, ooh, look, I know what he meant there. Oh, I'm going to pat. I know what he meant by era. It's like, come on, just move on and be fresh.
Yeah, it's what happens when you have the same stable across 4 different companies over a decade. PWG, ROH, NXT, and now AEW. It's just, after a while, there's only so much you can do with that name and with that dynamic attached to you, and it's time to move forward. I like the name Paragon or the Undisputed Paragon better.
Yeah. Zach Barber said they were chanting "We the People" at Jake Hager, and that's what Jericho was shouting down. Yeah, I think that's right. Standard Deviation says, at least come up with a sentence that logically ends in, and that is undisputed, instead of being totally disconnected to the preceding words. LOL. There is that too. Tej, anything else you want to bring up before we sign off tonight?
Only that, my level of hype for AEW is the highest it's been in at least the last year and a half. Are they, hitting the highs they were in 2021, 2022? Maybe not, but it feels like everything is focused. Everything has a purpose. Whether or not it's being executed the best way possible, not for me to say. But for the first time, it feels like AEW is moving towards a goal and is on an upswing. And as a fan of wrestling, regardless of what company, that makes me happy.
Well, I will say, please like this show. Please comment below. Subscribe to our channel. Set an alert to be notified when we go live. Appreciate those of you who have done that and keep doing it. We appreciate it. Another reminder, VIP membership, pwtorch.com/govip. Credit card, debit card, PayPal, Patreon, Spotify, or your Apple account. All works. Also, if you're interested in being a contributor to PWTorch, you can check out the staff and contact us page for a list of openings, or just email me. And the email for those kind of applications to be part of the site, our great team of volunteer contributors, is kellerwade@gmail.com. And we've been fielding inquiries on that and adding some new columns and features, which is awesome. I love that part of my job, is bringing new writers, new voices, new perspectives, proofreading, and just adding things to the mix that we then propagate out through our website. So please do check out pwtorch.com on a regular basis. And remember, we are here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday live. And then the NXT post show and post pay-per-view shows are also here on the YouTube channel. And then also check out Frank Pettiani put up a new Pro Wrestling Then and Now with John Mazzara earlier today, covering another event from the past. What else? What else is worth plugging? I don't know. Maybe that's enough. So, Tej, thanks so much. Always great talking pro wrestling with you. Really appreciate it.
Pleasure as always. Thank you always for giving me such a warm welcome, chat. I almost did the Kenny Omega outro, but I forgot what it was, so we'll leave it there.
Sounds good. Thank you, chat, for great job adding to the show and just being a cool group of people talking wrestling here for a couple of hours. And you can get your 7-day free trial. Search PWTorch VIP through Patreon or Spotify, or search PWTorch in your Apple Podcast app. Subscribe to that charcoal colored logo, and you can upgrade and get a free trial that way too. Or just dive in and go full VIP. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. We'd love to have you as a VIP member, and you're missing out on a lot if you are not. And if you missed it yesterday, Greg Parks joined me on the flagship, and we talked for a couple of hours, or an hour and a half plus, about AEW Dynasty in depth, and also looked at the lineup for WrestleMania and some other topics. That is free and available right now. Just search PWTorch and Wade Keller in your podcast app. Subscribe to all our free podcasts that way if you decide not to go VIP. Thanks, everybody, and we'll talk to you next time.